It was summer 1848 when Sam Brannan ran through the streets of San Francisco shouting, "Gold! Gold in the American River!" And in a few days, there was hardly a man left in the city. By 1849, people had come from all over the world hoping to strike it rich. Now, one of those hopeful miners, a man named William George Wilson, had filed his claim and built a log cabin east of Sacramento on Canyon Creek in Placer County. But unlike other miners, Bill Wilson had brought along his wife. Lonely miners would often go miles out of their way to pass the Wilson cabin. Except for the Native Americans, women were a rarity in the gold country. Women moving to California preferred to stay in cities, like San Francisco or Monterey. It was worth going out of your way to catch a glimpse of Mrs. Wilson. Sometimes she was outside working in the garden or hanging up the laundry. Now it happened that on Christmas Day, 1849, Mrs. Wilson had a little baby. Well, not so little. A 12-pound little boy. Later that day, Bill Wilson saw two miners walking by. He waved at them. "Hey, would you like to see the 12-pound nugget I got today?" Well, of course they did. They ran over to the cabin. "I'll take you in one at a time, if you don't mind." That seemed reasonable. Wilson took the first fellow, a big, burly Irishman, into the small cabin. He pointed to the baby in his wife's lap. "There's my nugget. Would you like to hold it?" The miner's face creased in smiles, and when he stepped out of the cabin, he said to his friend, "Hey, it's the best nugget I've ever seen." Then the second miner went inside, and he too got to hold this tiny piece of new humanity. And that would have been the end of the story, except those two miners told the other miners that Bill Wilson got a 12-pound nugget on Christmas Day. Aye, and to let you hold it. The news spread all over the gold country. A 12-pound nugget. Well, that was inspirational to all those gold-hungry miners. They came from miles around to the Wilson cabin, asking if they could see the nugget. The Wilsons loved the joke. They'd invite the men in, a few at a time, and no one gave it away. They'd come out and tell the others, "A real purty nugget," or "The Wilsons have sure struck it rich." Even when the joke got out, miners still came by the Wilson cabin to see the baby. Some miners in a nearby camp made a gold ring for Mrs. Wilson, and they all came over together to present it. And it seems like that baby brought luck to Bill Wilson, because shortly after the baby's birth, he did find a gold-filled crevice. Now, how do we know this story? One of those miners, William Bennett, kept a diary. He published his memoirs in 1893, and he tells about the first baby born in the gold country. I wish I could tell you what happened next. I suppose, Bill Wilson being a Mormon, he went back to Utah with Mrs. Wilson and their little baby. But I always like to think of this story as a little gold nugget.